would you want?
Sorry to interrupt you there.
No, that's all good. So just to give a quick recap of the couple things we said, we're going to look at FMHAM, and it stands for Headless Authorization Module. It's been authored by Charles Delfs, and I just did a demo file with it because it speaks more to me. And there are some distinction in between this rendition and the native one, but all in all, if there's anything like this demo file, I make available to anyone who emails me or just goes to my website and fill out the contact form and says, hey, Robert, can you send me the demo file you used for FMHAM? I'll be more than happy to email that out. So yeah, to do its magic, FMHAM is asking that we provide it a couple things, one being a JSON object that has the overall structure of the authorizations. And then it also asks that we provide a definition for a user. So what groups the user belongs to. And that's pretty much it. It also requires that we use FileMaker 18 at the minimum, because in the custom functions that are being used, it does make use of the while function that was introduced with 18. So anything under 18 is not going to work. If I'm being asked why it is that I like this so much, it is because it let us do a couple things that are not really easy to do when we're thinking of the I'm going to say traditional approach to authorization. Basically, FMHAM lets you define your groups in a way where you can say, oh, this group will inherit privileges from another group. So that can be very useful. And another thing that can be very useful is that it lets you assign a given user to multiple groups, not just one group at a time. So that too can be very, very useful. So we'll look at our sample file. It is a sample file that is based on the FileMaker starter file for assets. Okay, so if I go back over here, I can see that I have one asset over here. We're gonna play with this record a little bit, and then I used it because it's a file that had more than one table, so an asset table and then an employee table. And employee for our needs was going to be close enough to users. So I said, okay, I'll start from there. And you do see here in the footer, I have an image of a Venn diagram. And the Venn diagram is it's just an image. It's not live. It doesn't reflect anything that we have in terms of the actual users in this file. But I think it's a Venn diagram that perhaps is a bit closer to what things are like in real life when we think of granting authorizations to our users. Meaning, there are some overlaps. There are some cases where nothing overlaps. So if we take all of D and all of C, we have no overlaps. All of E and all of A do not have any overlaps. But then within those, we see that there are some that will overlap sometime with only two groups, or sometime more than two. And I didn't count the number recently, but I think there are up to maybe 14 intersections in this graph alone. So someone who wants to do this in FileMaker needs to quite literally implement 14 different privilege sets. And if there is something that happens in the group that I'm going to call AC, if they want to grant a privilege there, because there's no inheritance, then you need to go in A and say, okay, should I grant this also? and you need to go in C and say, should I grant this also? And that's the oversimplified version, because you need to quite literally go to ABC to see if what you granted in AC should also be in there, and so on and so on. So you get the picture that depending on how our things are configured, the maintenance aspect of things can get a bit hairy. So now let's have a look at our actual user records. Okay. So the user record is used in this demo file to handle both privileges that stand for exclusively for the user. Okay, so anything that I want to add over here will be granted only to that one user, and also to handle what is granted to a group. So if I have two users showing the same group, when I'm making edits on the right-hand side of the screen, those edits apply to the whole group and de facto to all users who belong to the said group. There is no dedicated UI to handle just the groups. It's all for simplification handled in this one screen that we see here. So user privileges are optional. There is nothing like we can totally have a given employee where there would be nothing standing in there. But every user needs to belong to at least one group. That you cannot have a user that does not belong in a group. So that is something we need to know. And then we have a main group with its privilege. And what we can see is that, for instance, on a given group, we can define the inheritance. So the administrator group right now inherits from buyers and from sales staff. Okay. So anything that is defined in there flows in here. We're not going to see it here because it's not here that we want to manage it. But if I was to go over here, well, over here we have those privileges, and those are all bubbling up, if I may say, into the administrator group. Okay, and the values that you'll see more often are going to be set to 1. Okay, sometimes there are values that are not 1 and zeros. Like here we have asset price limit, so that's an actual like dollar limit that I want to have over here. And by default, a privilege that you do not have will return 0 when you query it with the module, okay, with the custom function. But if, for instance, here we are inheriting from the salesperson group and the buyers group, and the buyers, those two groups do have the privilege that is not for admins. So here, if I am in an administrator group and I want to be sure that this group does not have that privilege, I need to explicitly zero it out. Okay, and if there's any conflicts in between what is defined at the group level and what is defined at the account level, well, the account is really having the last say in all that we see over here. And you can see also that you get to be creative if you want, because over here I have things that are not exclusively privileges. I'm using this to store preferences, so you can create just about anything you feel like. Like here I have something for text size and window dimensions, but basically you get to have access to this from anywhere in the system. So if you feel like putting a key, then you get to query for that key, and you'll have access to this across the whole system. So something else about the groups over here, we have not only inheritance, but we can say, okay, my user has the administrator group, but I want to have more than just that group. I want to have another group that will be either superseding my user's group, or that will be superseded by my user's primary group. And each of those can be lists of groups. So it's very flexible. So we're going to get into those details a little bit later in the presentation. So for now, I just want to do a quick tour of the different employees that we have in here, and then I'll go and start doing some edits on our assets that we saw earlier. So Julie is our admin, and we saw that she's able to do a bunch of things. We have Samantha. Samantha is part of the buyers group. We see here that the asset price limit for the buyers group is set to 2,500, but in her case, she must be one of the senior buyers because she's got the same privilege, but set to 50-50 instead of 2,500. So when we look at Eric Turner, he's part of the sales staff. He can edit the asset, but he cannot change the price. And if we are looking at Jeffrey, he's also a buyer. In this case, the price limit is lower, so perhaps he's one of the junior buyers or something like that. Here we have Fred, and Fred belongs to a group that we call corporate. And what is special about corporate is it's a group that inherits from 3 other groups: East, West, and Central. So we're going to see what this, how this is special. And we have Romeo, and Romeo is simply a user that I'm using when I need to go and look at different groups without messing around with the actual groups my other users have. So he's really there as a dummy account, just for the purpose of letting me see the other groups. So let's just go and log in as Eric for a minute. Okay, and we're gonna go to our asset, and we're going to try to edit the price. Okay, so here we have a price field that does have a script trigger tied to it, and here we have the same price field without the script trigger. Okay, so if I start wanting to make an edit over here, and I go out, it tells me my profile does not allow me to modify this value. Okay, and if I try to do the same edit where there is no trigger, so over here, what we are seeing is not the show custom dialog we just saw. It's really a validation message that is coming from field validation. Some people will say, well, field validation is not really security. And I would say, well, that may be right, but for all intent and purposes, I think in this case, it gives me what I want, meaning even if the user says, okay, he can't carry on and have the value that he put in there apply. He actually needs to revert the record, and we're back to where we started. So that's pretty much my intent here. So let's go look at what we have if we're logged in with someone who has some rights to make edits. Okay, so I'm going to log in as Jeffrey, and I'm going to go back to my asset over here, and I'm going to say, okay, it's 9091 like this. Now I'm getting a different message, and it tells me that it exceeds the amount I can set for the asset. So it's no longer telling me I can't edit the price. It's telling me the amount I picked is too large. Okay. Same thing if I come in here and I do this, I'm still getting the error validation. And basically over here, we don't get to calculate the message that is on display. So you'd want to pick a message that is relevant for the situation. so the user can have some clue in terms of why he's seeing this message and what action he should be doing. So I'll revert, but now if I say, okay, we know that he's got this limit to $1,000. So now if I do edit with a price that is under $1,000, it goes through for both the field that has the script trigger and the field that has the validation. So that's what we get when we are logged in as Jeffrey. Now let's go have a look at what happens if I'm logged in with an account that has full access. Okay, and just to make sure that we have full access, I can get to define database or manage database, I should say. So with our asset over here, we have a script. And now if I set this to something like this, the script still runs. And in this case, the amount is larger than what my full access account has in terms of privilege, I will say. So it gives me the same error message. If I wanted to say, okay, I'll go to 999, then this goes through. Again, if I say 975, it goes through. But if I say it's 12,000, then that is not within the range that we get to deal with. Okay. So one last thing I want to show before we start peeking under the hood. I'm sorry, I need to revert the record. Is what happens if I'm logged in with Fred, because Fred doesn't even have the asset edit privilege. Okay, so as I log in with his account and go to the asset, even if I just try to edit something that is over here, then I get another message that is not validation. This is the actual dialogue that comes straight from security. Okay, so with this, we know that our user cannot edit this record because he's not allowed to. And now let's relog in with the admin account to go see how this is set up under the hood. So if I log in with Julie and go see our record here. So first, what we have for the price, I'm going to look at the script that runs on the trigger, and it's a pretty simple script. Okay, it's calling a custom function that is coming from FM ham, and the custom function says ham check priv. Okay, so checking for a privilege, and in the way that I'm naming my privileges, you can name them however you want. You know, it's just going to retrieve the key next to it. But the way I like to name them is as if there is an implicit is allowed that is at the end of any of my privileges. So in this case, asset price edit is allowed. So if I am not allowed to asset price edit, then I'm showing a message that says, hey, you can't modify the price for this item, and then it reverses the record, and we're back here. And if it so happens that this check goes through, then we are doing one more check, and we're looking, is the price that was entered greater than the price limit that we have, again, coming from ham. And if it is greater, then we say, well, that's just too large. You know, you need to do something else, and we revert and we exit out. So that's very, very simple. And I think in terms of readability, because that was my my other presentation that I did, it feels to me like we're getting some good readability when we look at those function calls. So now we know that with this over here, there is no script trigger that is involved. So it's something that takes place at the field validation level. So let's go have a look at the validation we have for price. Validation we have for price is defined by a calculation. And again, it's basically the same thing that we already saw. We're saying, okay, we want to allow the edit if the price is under the asset price limit. And we also need to make sure that the user is allowed to edit the price for the asset in the first place. Okay, so when all those conditions are being met, then there's not going to be a validation message error that is being shown to the user. And if any of this fails, then we get to see the message that is over here. So this gives us that. And then the one more thing that I need to show over here was when I was logged in with Fred, who could not edit the record. Well, there is something that I've done in here, and it's to create an unstored calculation in all my tables, and in all my tables, the fields are named the same, okay, and we'll see why in just a short little while. So those two fields here, record edit is allowed and record delete is allowed, with a calculation that is pretty simple. It's just saying, hey, let's check for the privilege that the user can edit the asset, okay, and if he can edit the asset, then we get a 1, and if he cannot, then we get a 0. And that's something we're going to rely on in our security. So once I go out of here and into security, what we're going to see is the admin account is on the full access privilege set, but everyone else is sharing the exact same privilege set. And I chose to name that privilege set everyone, okay? And when we go look at the privilege set, the way it is set up is simply something where for record level access, we have custom privileges. And when we look at how things are done, I'm simply saying, well, for edits and deletes, we're going to limit those. And the limitation is going to be set to record edit is allowed, because in here, you simply have to mention the field. If it is local to the table, you don't have to prefix it with a table occurrence and double colon or anything. So this makes it very simple for me to then come in here, open the calculation dialog, and then go to my next table, and then do the same and paste my field name, and then boom, 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 boom. I do this in all my tables. Same thing for the delete. I just make sure that I'm using the right calculation field, and then I replicate that down there. And once I'm done with this, I don't have to come back in here. Everyone is on the same privilege set. So if I ask myself a question of who can do what, well, the answer is in the calculation field, So whereas if I have 14 privilege sets and someone asks me, hey, Robert, could you tell me who is able to edit invoices? Well, I need to go and drill down to this level in every single of the 14 privilege sets to figure out, oh, can this privilege set grant edit level access to invoices, yes or no, and so on and so on. So, and the only nuance is there are things that we do not have granular control on. One being the field level access, okay? And that's because there's no calculation that's possible there. Same thing for create. So for field level access, you saw that I'm relying on validation for edits. But if you need to say that someone cannot see a given field, I'd be tempted to define the table structure in a way where you have tables that are set to have one-to-one relationships in between each other, and then you'd grant access to a whole table, and you'd ban access to the other. And I'm not applying restrictions to view, because oftentimes when we are applying view restrictions, there's a heavy performance price to pay for things like that. So if you have to implement that, just make sure that you do so carefully. And if there are things where for anything else I need to have different privileges, then all I need to do is I come in here, I duplicate the set, and I say, well, for everyone who's in here, they're not going to be able to print, or they're not going to be able to export. And I say, okay, and I'm done. I don't need to go in here and customize the entries for every single table and so on and so on. So it saves me from a lot of the maintenance nightmare that something can come up with when we have new restrictions that need to be enforced, or when someone is having a new role, and it's a combination of different things that we had before, and so on and so on. So I'm just going to cancel out of all of this. So any questions with what we've seen up to date?
So it seems like what you've done is taking the core FileMaker security system, you've set it up in such a way that you can layer on top of that, using custom functions and field definitions, a more nuanced permission system that sort of cooperates with the background FileMaker structures. Am I understanding that correctly?
I think that would be a correct definition for the setup we have here. Cool. Saying I don't want this to be defined in the security dialogues. I'm going to point to other resources, in this case fields, that are a part of my tables, and at that point FileMaker is not going to care. I mean, it could be data that is written in each record. In this case, it just so happens it's not data that is written in each record. It's a calculation. So it just goes on and says, okay, well, I see a calculation here. I need it to resolve. So it's going to run the function, and it's going to output something that tells it if the edit can take place or not. So
can I just ask, given record level security, does this have a big performance hit? Have you done it on larger systems or not? Are you familiar with its effect on performance?
Well, it's no different, I would say, than anything that you may have that involves record level access. The second you are going into security, and say that you are changing the
record level
something, for record level over here, there is no storage option over here. So FileMaker, I doubt that there's much gain when the data is actually indexed and so on. Perhaps there is some, but it's also limiting. The cases where you can actually enforce a limitation based on something that is all set in stone in the record. So more often than not, even what you are writing down here, even if it's not pointing to a field, it's going to end up being some form of unstored calculation, or point to globals, or ask for a function to a get function or something else to do that. So the thing is to edit records like one at a time. That's going to go well. Same thing for deletions. But the second you're talking about bulk edits or bulk deletion, then yes, the server, before it can acknowledge and say, yes, I'm going to edit the record, or yes, I'm going to delete that record, it needs, for each record individually, it needs to figure out how does this, what does this resolves to, you know? So there are ways around this. You could say, okay, for those specific scripts, I'm going to see that they run as full access if your script and the data are part of the same file. You can do that. If you have data separation, then even if you grant full access rights to a script in a UI file, it's not going to grant it full access rights in the data file. So you have to make some informed decisions about how you want to go for things like that.
Makes sense. Yeah, thanks.
So there's a couple of the things I want to show about this, and it's something where the where FMHAM will let us define privileges, making sums or max, or even letting us evaluate an expression on the fly. Okay, so there are some scenarios where group inheritance really will play a big role in how you define things. So let's just say you have a vertical, okay, and in your solution, you have paid plans, okay, they could be bronze, silver, and gold, or light, pro, ultimate, whatever you want to call them, and say your system allows you to send SMS messages, okay, and on the bronze plan, it's 100 messages per month, and on the silver plan, it's 100 more, and then on the gold plan, it's 200 on top of everything else. Okay, so then you could define your groups and say, okay, this one, I'm going to have something where it says underscore sum, and like over here, we have this bundle thing, okay, underscore sum. So if I have 2 of those, then it's going to add up to 50, okay. And so if you have the bronze, silver, and gold, where gold inherits from silver and silver itself inherits from bronze, then you would define your SMS monthly allowance to 100, but it would be monthly allowance underscore sum, you know, and then you'd put 100 in there, and in the silver you'd put 100 again, and in gold you would put 200. And once you are logged in the proper group, it would resolve making the sum of everything. And also sometimes there are cases where even with straight inheritance, where it's impossible to define something that would give us a match. You know, for instance, over here, we said that Fred belongs to the corporate group, and the corporate group inherits from east, west, and central. Okay, and whenever we have conflicts in between each of those, the conflicts are being resolved in the order they are shown in. So we're going to have a look at those 3 groups. Okay, I've designed them to make it so that they do conflict in between each other, and just by straight inheritance, the last one would win over the first 2. Okay, but with functions like sum and max, then we have a whole lot more flexibility. So let's just go have a look at what we have for central. Okay, so we have asset price limit underscore max set to 1. Okay, we've got some other stuff, underscore sum set to 1, and we got another thing, underscore max set to 1. Okay, so here everything is set to 1. If we go to East, we have asset price limit of 1,000, and we have 2 for other stuff, and we have 13 for other thing. And if I look at West, in the West, we have asset price limit set to 100 and other stuff set to 3 and other thing max set to 1,000. So like I said, with just inheritance, if I stack them, okay, if I put West on top of everything, well, I'm going to get 1,000 here, but I'm also going to get 100. I'm not going to get 1,000. You know, if the max is not part of the privilege naming, okay, and if I make East the one on top of everything, well, then I'll get 1,000 for my my price limit, but I'll get I forget what it was, maybe 13 for the other thing, and so on and so on, and for whatever other stuff I have, I'm gonna get just the one value that's there. So let's go and have a look at our employee, who is Fred, and I'm gonna log in as him. Okay, and then I'm gonna bring the data viewer just so we can look at a couple things together. So I'm gonna look at this courtesy variable. Okay, you don't need to have that in the system, but for me, it makes it easier to see what the module puts together in terms of the privileges that we get. So for asset price limit, we see that we get 1,000. Okay, and that's coming from East, I believe. For the other thing, we are getting 1,000, and that is coming from the West because we were asking for the max, okay, in both of those. And for other stuff, we're getting 6 because we had 1, 2, and 3, and it was other stuff underscore sum, so that if I sum those together, well, it adds up to 6. So that's very nice. And we see also here, Fred has something called rolling credits eval, okay? And we see a string here that says they get current date times 100, okay? So let's have a quick look at that. And the string is simply coming from over here. You know, it says they get current date times 100. I chose to put this in here, okay? And then if I want to say, okay, well, what are my rolling credits? Well, we're the 14th of December. So if I do a function call for check priv against rolling credits, it's gonna give me 1,400. So that is really a ton of flexibility that we get. If you want to say, okay, Fred can run this report, but he can only run the report on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and he cannot run it on Tuesdays and Thursdays and weekends. You know, and anything you pick, you get to put it in there, and it's gonna evaluate it for you. Okay. So and there are options in the config for you to choose if the evaluation happens at runtime, like we saw, that it keeps the string, or if it's evaluated at the initialization. And in this case, what we would see over here is the content that would be already evaluated. It would output as 1,400 already. So depending on if you want it to be holding the value throughout the session or not, then you can choose those things. So that makes for a ton of flexibility. And again, if I go to I think it's Eric Turner over here, he's part of my sales staff, but in terms of additional groups that I've granted him, I said he purchased my special bundle 3 times. Okay, so if I log in as him and I bring the data viewer again, okay, and I go look at what we have in here, my special bundle was having bundle thing underscore sum set to 25 because he's purchased it 3 times. I'm adding it to the group 3 times, then it ends up giving me 75 credits, I guess, of whatever the bundle thing is. So if you have a vertical solution, and even with the fact that you may have plans, you know, for entry level, mid, and like total package type of thing, there could still be items that you're not going to assign to a given plan. You're going to say you need to purchase this as an aside, and this lets you handle this very neatly, I would say. So we've looked at Fred Johnston, and we've looked at Eric. We've looked at the rolling credits. So the important thing about those functions is you need to define them when you are naming your privilege, okay? But you saw in the data viewer, when I'm calling for the privilege, I do not use any of the suffix, okay? Because it could be that the rolling credits happen to be an exact key without the suffix elsewhere in another group that gets priority over what is defined here. So we need to be sure that we're using the key without the suffix, and also it makes it easy when you're making your calls, because you don't have to remember, oh, was it defined with or without the suffix? You just call without the suffix all the time, and FMHAM is going to work its magic for you. So the next thing I want to talk about is users with multiple groups. So I think inheritance is awesome, but there are times where inheritance won't get to you there. We saw the Venn diagram. Sometimes you get someone who tells you, well, we have this new hire, you know, and he's going to be mostly sales, but he's going to be helping the folks with accounting. And then you're like, well, what should I do? You know, you have your privilege set for accounting that does nothing of what the sales needs to do. You have the sales one that does nothing of what the accounting needs to do, and then you're like, wow, am I really going to create a whole privilege set for just this one person, and so on and so on? What's going to happen, or are they going to end up just I don't know, sharing credentials, or well, that is perhaps something that is more likely to happen if someone goes on vacation. But yes, if also if someone goes on vacation, you want to backfill for that person. You want to be granted access to that group for a specific amount of time. Then it's much easier if you can take someone and say, okay, we're gonna bonify his user and give him access to multiple groups, then try to create a group that reflects this combination of different things for a short period of time, or things like that. So on the topic of users belonging in multiple groups, if we take an example, and I think I'm going to relog in as full admin for this, because I'm going to be pointing at some of what I have in here. So if we take an extreme example, okay, let's just say we are running a school, and we have the principal and the janitor, and they each go on vacation, and they need to backfill for the other one. Well, if we have the principal who is taking on the duties of the janitor, if there are things that the janitor can do that will conflict with what the principal can do, we want the principal to retain his his authorization levels, So in this case, we would say, okay, my main group is to be principal, and then I'm going to add over here a group that says janitor or something like that, so that I get both of the privileges from the two groups. But if there are any conflicts, they're going to be resolved where the principal is going to win over my my janitor privilege. Okay, and in the same fashion, if I am the janitor, now having janitor as my main group, and I'm sorry, I'm replacing for the principal, then in this case, what we'd want to have is something where I come in here and I grant that user the principal group over here to make sure that as a janitor, if the principal status grants him more rights than what he's got, we want those things to supersede his current janitor status and take over, if you may, the existing things. So that's something that is really helpful for a bunch of things. If you have groups where people need to be in more than one groups without you having to create a new group that is just a combination of things that already exist, and like we saw for people filling in for someone else. Now you see here that I have a group that I've assigned to all my users actually, and that group is called disabled features. So we can go have a look at disabled features, but it's something that if you so choose, you can go in here and say, okay, well, I'll define some things here, like more stuff and some new stuff, and then in this case, this one is zeroed out. So as a developer, I can grant myself more stuff and work on this and have this be literally unavailable to all of the other users. I can even go in other groups and grant the more stuff privilege, set it to 1, for the groups that will need to have access to it when we're going to roll that out and have the feature be live. And once I need the feature to be live, the only thing I need to do is come in here and then just delete the entry for more stuff set to 0. So in that case, only the folks who need to have access to it will have access to it. And another thing that we have down here is for the new stuff, if it's something that needs to apply to everyone, I would say that the go live would be for everyone. Then you could choose when you want this to go live. You could say, okay, we'll take a timestamp and define the date and the time. This is a bit far off, January 1st of 2100, but you get to pick a date that is sooner than this. And there you go. You've worked on your feature, and then if you decide that on that Monday at 9 a.m. it becomes available for everyone, then this will simply resolve to 1. And at that point, I guess the disabled feature naming is no longer quite right, because if something in here is set to 1 or resolves to 1, and the disabled group or disabled feature has been added to every users groups, then as soon as it shows as 1 over here, everyone will have access to that feature. So you need to take that into account. But there could be cases where this will prove useful, and you could define a group and call it developer, and then in that group put the privileges for the features that you're working on, that you want only the developers to have access. There's really a bunch of nice feature in that module. So Now, if we are saying, okay, this all looks great, what is it that that I need to put in my system for it to work? Well, it's pretty simple. If we have a quick look, we can say, let's manage custom functions. Okay, so Ham comes with those 3 custom functions. I've added this one over here to handle the dots in the keys of my privilege names, but you don't need that to use Ham by itself, like I said. And I've also added this FM list to JSON array, because anytime that I'm having things in lists, let it be in here or as the list of inheritance, this get converted to a JSON array that I'm sending in. So I use the custom function for that, but it's not anything that make FM Ham work. And then when we go look at the scripting, sorry. So if we get the script, first I want to take a second to give credit where it's due. So thanks to Charles Delfs and contributors for putting Ham together in the first place, and also thanks to Steve SSH. He's published a custom function that I've used to allow for the privilege keys to have dots in them. So, but basically, in terms of scripting, it's somewhat simple. You know, there is what we have on first window open, where we're simply trying to get the whole package of what is the definition of all the groups with all their privileges. Okay. And in my case, because it stands in records, you know, I'm having this this loop that puts everything together, but you could quite literally do away with all this and say it's going to be just this one JSON object in my solution, or you can hard code it in a script or in a custom function. It's not gonna care, you know. So if I bring the data viewer just to give you an idea of what that looks like. So I'm storing that in a global field called ham all groups authorizations. And in here we see all the groups, you know, like the administrator group. What is it that it can do? Well, asset price limit, it can edit to 10,000. And then for employees, here's what it can do, and so on and so on. And we see that it inherits other groups like the buyers and the sales staff, and so on and so on. And then we see, okay, buyers, what is it that they can do? And so having the full definition is what lets Ham figure out when we say, oh, this group inherits from that, then it's gonna actually go down into that other group and merge everything together to give us the end result. Okay, and the end result is stored in $ham config. Okay, which is not having any of the JSON pretty print, if you may, but it's the same as when we were looking at $flat. And if you don't like that the system is storing informations like these in a global variable, you have different options. One is to use an encryption key. Okay, and in that case, it's going to encrypt the content that we're seeing here, but it's going to ask for you to send in the decryption key on all of your calls to Ham checkpriv. And the other option that you have is you can change the function to rely on a global field instead of the $ham config global variable. So because global variable, if someone has access to the calculation engine, then it's up for grabs. And but a global field, you can totally secure that any way you like. So that's what happens when we log in, and Then when we run the setup, it's again somewhat simple. Here I'm retrieving things from my user account, okay, trying to see what are the different groups, what are his exclusive privileges, and then do I have multiple groups or do I have a single group? So if it's a single group, my group is going to be a straight string, and if multiple groups, then it's a JSON array, and then everything happens over here. We're calling ham_config, and we're passing in, like I said, all of our authorizations, and then the definition of our user. So what are the groups that he's into, and the overrides are the user specific authorizations. Okay, and param over here, like I said, is for some settings. So if you want to use some default configurations, if you want to use I'm sorry, an encryption key, this is where you specify that. So that's it in a nutshell. I would say if you are using something where your keys are defined with dots in them, just make sure that when you define them, that you don't step on your own toes. You know, if I look at privileges, you know, for instance, over here, table x.edit and table x.edit subcomponent, well, this really is a key that stands in the value for this key in a JSON object. So you cannot have two keys of your overall JSON where one key is a substring of another one. Okay, and just trying to see from my notes if there's anything else that I might be missing on, but I think that's it. So I'm just gonna check on the chat quickly, and if anyone has any questions or comments, it's more than welcome.
Well, that's pretty interesting. It's quite in depth. I'm curious, Robert, how do you feel someone will get started? Because it strikes me as sort of a kind of there's a whole kind of a framework that you have to sort of think through, and clearly you've done that. How would you, if someone was unfamiliar with this and wanted to get started, how would you recommend they go about learning this?
I would say it depends where you're starting from. I can say for myself, I was already somewhat close because when I was checking in my authorizations for something, I was already using a custom function to do that. And the custom function was already calling for a specific string. Now that string, instead of being held in JSON like that, it was quite simply part of the manage security. If we go over here, extended privileges, you know, I would have in my files, you know, I would have something here that tells me, okay, you know, asset edit, okay, something like that, and then I would grant it to the privilege sets, you know, that I wanted to have in there, okay, and I would use that function to then, well, there's a function that lets you query, okay, what is the list of extended privileges that you get from a given user based on the privilege set that he's into, you know, and in some cases I would swap that out with something that is coming from a carriage return delimited list that I get from the user record, and then I just put that in a global at startup or things like that. But one way or another, I would have those things, and then it was easy for me to swap in FMHAM because the concepts were the same. The only things were that I had limitations were that I could not really have anything where the groups would inherit from one another, and I could not have a user that belongs to more than one group. So I'm just getting more more goodies, you know, when rolling this out. If you are starting from um, a profile that is very different, where you have perhaps scripts that are testing for explicit privileged set names or account names, then that's a tough place to be in, because technically, even if you want to roll this in, there is no easy conversion. You're going to need to go in there and say, well, I was looking for this account name. Now I need to look for what the actual thing is doing, and who it is that I granted it. My setup is going to take care of that for me, you know. So it's a different mindset. Same thing if you have things that are checking for privilege set name. Is it accounting or is it sales? That is really limiting you. But you can completely revisit any of those things, and there's nothing that forces you to go all in. You know, if you have something that is checking for account name in one script and for a privilege set name in another script, you know, you could say, okay, well, I'm gonna drift away from that, and I'm gonna use ham for the newer stuff, you know, and slowly you're gonna replace some of those checks in elsewhere as you go. You know, there's nothing that says you have to be doing things only with ham, and if you do not, it's not going to work. Everything you've got is still going to be working, you know. It's just like anything else. If you had a solution where you were using, I'm going to say, the FileMaker charting tools, you know, and then you want to move over to web viewers that will show charting that involves JavaScript with some libraries and pretty HTML add-ons and things like that, and you can do that. You don't need to start ripping off everything, ripping out everything that you've built into your solution, and replace each and every one of those for your thing to work. You can quite literally say, well, on the next one I'll implement, I'll be using this technique instead, and there's nothing that is going to force you to go to put the dial all in on anything like that. So
Makes sense.
you can choose.
So you can layer it on existing methodologies, which is cool. Nice, interesting. Yeah, I think we're definitely. I can, you know, it's a different way of thinking about security than I've ever used, and but it's kind of interesting. I really like it. It's interesting.
Yeah, what I like the most about it is the versatility. You know, I quite literally, I'm having a hard time thinking of something that someone would come up with that with something like this, I would not be able to say, yeah, I'll make it happen. You know, I can throw pretty much anything in there, and yeah, I'm still going to be able to have it be as granular as I need it, and that's what's magical for me, because I've stopped counting how many times, you know, I went into the security dialogues and checking from one privilege set to the next. Okay, are the rights there? This, and that, and then even testing. You know, you want to test. Hey, what happens if this user cannot, or this user? I just go in, you know, onto my very own user, and I revoke the privilege, or I add it, and then I tested it new, and then I get the render right there without without me having to relog in or do any of those things. So you need to be sure though that what you're doing, like the config you apply to your own user, is the exact same one that would be applied to the user you're testing for. You know, I mean, nothing's going to replace an actual relog in if that's what you need. But we saw that even if you create test accounts that belong to a different group, for everything that is not record level access, a full access account is still going to be limited with the same field level validation and the same scripts. And if you're using this for height conditions on a screen, it's not going to care if you're full access or not. It's just going to say, well, this is what the calculation tells me. So there you go.
Very cool. Very cool. That's really a good. It's funny because we just one of our guys just finished having to change the privilege sets in a fairly large existing system.
Mm-hmm.
It was a big undertaking. He ended up, we were using the conventional method of, just customizing the actual, privilege sets, but it was a very time-consuming process. And this would save a ton. And the ability to blend different sets or change something dynamically is just so valuable.
Yes, to me, it's really what brings a ton of value to something like this. So I'll put in the chat the URL for anyone who wants to use the contact form on my website and say, hey, you know what? I'd like to get a copy of this this demo file. It's pretty easy. It's accolade plus accolade.com/contact. Like I said, to me, it's been very useful to have something like that. And if it can be useful for someone else, I'll just be happy to share this more and more.
Right. Well, thank you. Yeah, because I have a feeling you'll be getting some requests, because I think there's several of us would be interested in learning more how to implement this. This is cool. We had one client that this would have been so perfect for. They had a fairly large WebDirect system that had a whole bunch of different types of users, and they were really struggling to manage some of this stuff. And
yeah,
really very valuable.
I had heard about Charles putting this together. I had heard that it was having something that would let a group inherit from another group, and that was really the one feature that sold me on. Even if it was just doing that without any of the rest, I would still be like, wow, I need this. And then once I got my hands on this and unpacked it, I couldn't believe the added features that would just bring more and more value to the mix. It's just so awesome.
Cool. Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you very much for presenting. That's a great. Does anyone else have any questions or comments they'd like to make? No. So we're at that point of the again, Robert, thank you very much. This is really helpful.
Thank you.
Nice,
I'll stop sharing my screen.
It's always nice to have a presentation where we sort of get an insight into a whole new world, which I really appreciate. It's great. Looking forward at our next month, let's just quickly look at the dates. Do some quick math here. I probably could have done this ahead of time, right? Would have been good. So are we looking maybe at the 19th of January? Does that sound good to everybody? Is the next date for us? I think we can go for that. And then my question to the group is, does anyone have any topics that they are interested in having us discuss, or even better, would like to present? Crickets. Uh-oh. Now, I think, Justin, I think you had a couple of topics that were suggested in the prior meetings. Is that correct?
Yes. Somebody had requested JavaScript, having people present on JavaScript, and Oliver had given me a couple of people who he'd seen presentations for that he recommended reaching out to. So we can reach out to them and see if any of those guys would like to present on JavaScript and FileMaker.
Awesome. Cool. Okay, great. So we'll head in that direction, and we'll target the 19th. And again, Robert, thank you very much. And everybody have a happy holiday in the meanwhile, right? So it is the holiday season.
Yes.
It was a great presentation. Thank you, Robert.
Yes.
Thank
very
you.
much. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert.
Awesome. Okay, well, have a nice holiday, and we will talk to everybody next month.
Likewise.
Take
Thank you.
care.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.